Today we are going to be outlining a novel from start to finish, and I will even give you a technique that you can use to outline a novel using an outlining structure that ChatGPT does not know. Let's get into it. Alright, so we're going to be writing in ChatGPT today, and we're going to be using the GPT-4 model. As before, this is currently capped to 25 messages every 3 hours, so hopefully we won't go over that today. I don't think we will, because we're not going to get super granular with this. But this is the tool that we're going to be using to outline a novel. If we go to our document here, this is the original synopsis we had for The Omnimancer, which is the book we're currently writing using AI. And this original synopsis was good. It gave us the basic beats of the novel. But it was very general in a lot of areas, and we did a whole lot more work with characters and world building to make sure that we had a much more fleshed out background. And so I went in and took this original synopsis and created this expanded synopsis, and I did this manually. I did not use AI for this, and wrote a much longer synopsis that added in a few more of the characters that we had developed using AI, added a few more of the subplots and world building in there. Most of the world building, actually, even though some of it was inspired by AI, a lot of that really came from me because that's something I really enjoy doing. Outlining is the same way. I actually really enjoy creating the outlines myself. And so this is a step that I might not normally take when outlining a novel. I might just decide to do it myself and then use AI to help me in other areas. And that's one of the beautiful things about using AI to write your novels, is that you don't have to use it for every step. You just kind of figure out where your biggest pain points are, and AI can smooth those over so that you can focus more on the things that you do love. But for the purposes of this video, we are going to be outlining with AI today, at least getting a basic outline to start with. So we have this expanded synopsis that I expanded on from the original. We're going to be using that. But before we get to this, we need to talk about what type of outline we're going to do. Okay, so there are many different types of outlines, and ChatGPT knows a whole lot of them. Okay, so you might, if you ask it to outline a novel based on the hero's journey, it can do that. It knows Save the Cat. It knows Dan Harmon's story circle. There are a lot of different commonly used outlining techniques that work really well in ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is already knowledgeable about them, so you don't need to give it any additional context or anything. You say just outline this story in the form of the hero's journey, and it can do that for you. However, there is a problem with this, and this isn't really a problem with the AI necessarily, but with outlining in general. Very often a good outlining structure will tell you what are some of the major milestones to hit, right? This is especially true of certain outline structures like the 7-plot point structure. That one, it just gives you a couple of different milestones, and you know you're working towards those milestones, and that can be great if you are a discovery writer and you don't necessarily want to know what happens. You just want to find your way there, but you want to have just a little bit of knowledge about what's coming in the not too distant future. For me, however, I really like to have everything planned out ahead of time. And so I like to have every chapter planned before I get into the writing. And I think that also makes it easier to write with AI as well. And so we're going to be using a different outlining tool called the 24 chapter novel outline. Now, I have just recently penned this post on my website. The 24 chapter novel outline was originally created by Derek Murphy, who's a friend of mine and really cool guy. I'll have a link to his YouTube channel and to his original post in the article below, and I'll have a link to my article about it as well in the description. But basically, this is a basic novel outline that gives you exactly what needs to happen in a series of 24 chapters. Now you can expand on those chapters. You can do what you want with them. You can, shift them around however you feel the story needs it. But it's a really great base point, and it works extremely well for AI. And the reason for that is because it clearly specifies what should be happening in every single section, every single chapter, and AI loves that kind of direction and that kind of framework. So, excuse me, we're going to be using this as the outline that we're going to outline the synopsis into. There's a problem with this, though, as well, and that is that ChatGPT, as far as I know, has not been trained on, nor does it know what the 24-chapter novel outline is. I've got a very detailed description here. This is just the quick summary, but if you keep scrolling, I've got details on every single chapter in the 24-chapter outline. And we want to find a way to tell ChatGPT how to outline using the 24-chapter novel outline. And this is actually pretty simple. So one of the reasons I created this quick summary here was to facilitate the use of the 24-chapter novel outline in AI. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this whole section so it knows exactly what's happening in the 24 chapters. We're going to go to ChatGPT using GPT-4, and we're going to load this information into ChatGPT. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to say, the following is a novel outlining structure that we are going to use today. Please process this. You can say this any number of ways and hold it in your memory for later use. And actually, back up. Say read if you understand. The reason I put that last part in, alright, so it just says read. The reason I put that last part in is because every time that ChatGPT gives you an answer, it's using up tokens. The more tokens you have, the less ChatGPT can remember. That's important to remember because all of this takes up space in ChatGPT's memory, and ChatGPT's memory is currently limited. GPT-4 has a much larger memory than GPT 3.5 did, so I'm not too worried about this, but if you get to have too much of a conversation with ChatGPT, it will forget some of the earlier stuff that it recorded. And so that is the reason why I tell it to only respond with read, so that we're using a minimum amount of tokens so that it can properly remember everything that I just put into it. All right, so that's an important thing to remember. I see a lot of people put just like 3 dots here instead of red. You know, you can do whatever you want. But the point is, I am loading it with this information about what the 24-chapter novel outline looks like. And with this, we can then go ahead and outline the novel. The prompt that I use for this is using the above chapter novel outline and the following synopsis, write an outline for an epic fantasy novel. Feel free to add additional elements or plot information where there are gaps in the synopsis. And I add that sentence in because sometimes it tries to force the synopsis to fit the outline and it doesn't always do it well. So I want to give it a little bit of freedom that if it needs to make up a little portion of the outline, it can do that. We can always change that later. And then I'm going to add here is the synopsis. And we're going to go here to this expanded synopsis that I already created, copy that, and paste right here, and hit enter and see what it gives us. All right, here's something that you will notice happens sometimes when you type into ChatGPT. It broke off mid-sentence here. It was in the middle of creating this 24 chapter outline, and it got stuck around chapter 18. So this is fine. This happens a lot. This just means that we kind of pushed the word count limit that it had. So all you have to do is just say continue and let it continue. And it literally picks up with the same word that it left off on. All right, so we are done letting it give us this initial outline. And it did an okay job. I noticed a few things as it was writing that I'm definitely going to change. But we're going to go ahead and copy and paste this into our document. I have to go ahead and copy both sets here. And there we have it. So you'll notice as we are looking at this right now that this is a very, very loose outline. Each chapter only has about one sentence for each chapter, which is certainly not enough to go writing a book with, especially if you are using AI to write the book. We need to give it more detail. So that's what we're going to do now. And there's not as much of an exact science to this process as there is with the first part. You may just have to flesh out a lot of it yourself. It can give you a good place to start, but overall, and we'll call this the broad outline. There we go. I'm just gonna add some headings here to make it easier to scroll through. So we're going to go ahead and flesh this out a little bit more, because sometimes it gets things wrong and it puts certain plot beats into places where you kind of realize it doesn't belong. And we'll probably do some fleshing out on our own, but we can also plug these back into ChatGPT and see if it can help us flesh this out even further. So, first of all, let's start with Act 1, Hero and the Ordinary Journey. Now, if we go back to this thing, we know that in Chapter 1, we have a really bad day, which establishes the character's flaws and desires through a conflict or problem that they face. This is not the main conflict. This is just this person's having a bad day. They're facing some kind of conflict. We want to start with that. So here it says, Lyra Thorne, a prodigious student at Bright Soul Academy, has a difficult time with her first attempt at raising the dead, feeling unsure of the morality of enslaving the dead. I think that's having her having a difficult time at raising the dead is a good way to start, kind of. But this feeling unsure about the morality of enslaving the dead seems a little too on the nose. And so I already have an idea how I want this to start. So I'm just going to add a little bit more here, not too much more. Let's say because her latent omnimancer abilities confuse her. No, that's not going to work, because the undead person she is trying to animate is all right. So I'm trying to fit this in the wrong way. So I'm trying to move on to Chapter 2 here. In Chapter 2, it says, during her first attempt, Lyra unknowingly communicates with the spirit of the dead man, Elric, and hears a beautiful song foreshadowing her unique abilities. That is something that I had put in the synopsis, although it has nothing to do with foreshadowing her unique abilities. But she is going to hear a beautiful song. And so I was just trying to fit that into Chapter 1. Now I'm thinking maybe we shouldn't do that. Another better way to improve Chapter 1 is to introduce us to some of the other characters. She has several friend characters. Let's see if I can just quickly, Well, no, I can add those in later. We are introduced to her friend as well as her arch nemesis, Nyx. This chapter also establishes that Lyra is an important individual, or rather her father is, but we don't see anything about her father. In this opening chapter, she is incredibly nervous about raising her first dead person. She has a conversation with her best friend, and I'll look up what the name of that best friend was later. I forget what it was. And in the conversation, we learn that she is questioning of the practice of necromancy in general, mostly because she has an older friend named, I believe this person's name was Aaron, who left the academy because she protested the practice. They are overheard by Nyx, who mocks them and says that they should be careful what they say, and that she will turn them in if they continue to speak treason like that. Something like that. I would probably go through and run through some ideas a little bit more, but that gives you an idea. Should probably have another scene in this chapter besides this one. So let's just say Lyra leaves. We should also establish where this is taking place. So she has a conversation in the mess hall at Bright Soul Academy. Alright, she leaves the mess hall and goes to her room. And I feel like we should have some kind of interesting foreshadowing moment here. Something to create mystery, something. On the way, she sees a group of undead servants bringing in a fresh corpse. She is intrigued, wondering if that corpse is the one she will be reanimating later. She can tell that the corpse is fresh because she can see a large wound in his chest, and the body has not decomposed yet. Something like that. All right. I've maybe fleshed this out a little bit too much here. This is what I would do on my own if I were doing this. But let's see if we can take this and plug it into ChatGPT and see if it can give us even more details. So for this, we're going to use a prompt, take the following chapter description and flesh it out even further with more details for the outline. Something like that. Add in the thing there and hit enter, and we'll see if it can flesh this out even more. I probably should have given it... Oh, this is interesting. So it gave a name to her friend, her best friend, which is not the name I picked. So I'm going to have to go in there and flesh that out a little bit and change the names. But it's actually doing a decent job here. And now it's getting to a point where it's going off of what I gave it and starting to add its own stuff. And some of this isn't bad. So it says, this chapter sets the stage for Lyra's emotional conflict and the challenges she will face in the future. It introduces the main characters, hints at Lyra's unique abilities, and foreshadows the tensions and dangers that lie ahead as Lyra's journey unfolds. That's actually not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and use that. And I think this paragraph here is also good. So I'm actually going to take this and use it exactly as it says. And we'll go ahead and paste that. So now we have a pretty well fleshed out chapter 1. Now, this is how I would do it, where I would flesh it out myself and add my own input, because I think that's going to lead to a better story, at least for the kind of story I have. But let's say we wanted to flesh out this chapters with a lot more AI help. So let's take chapter 2, and rather than adding my own bit to it, let's plug this into here and add the same sort of prompt. Take the following chapter description and flesh it out further. Add more story beats, information on location, and world building, so we can accurately write the scene later. All right, that's not a prompt that I have tested or planned. A lot of the times when you're working with these things, you just kind of have to give it a few tries, you know. So we're going to go ahead and paste that in there, and we'll see how much it gives us. Now, we have already given it this one, so it has a good example of what a fully fleshed out chapter description should look like. So I'm hopeful that it will give us much more information here. All right, so yes, it is actually giving us a pretty detailed description of what this looks like. It says, surrounded by her peers and the watchful gaze of her master, the atmosphere is heavy with anticipation and the weight of tradition. The dead man, Elric, lies on an altar at the center of the room, still bearing the wound from his untimely demise. Lyra, with trembling hands, begins the ritual to raise Elric from the dead. As she recites the incantation, she feels a strange connection to the man's spirit. Inexplicably, she hears a beautiful, haunting melody in her head, echoing the notes of a song that once held great meaning for Elric. Now, she couldn't know any of that, but that's something that we could fix. This unexpected occurrence confuses and intrigues Lyra, but she presses on with the ritual, aware of the watchful eyes of her instructor and fellow students. The room is filled with an eerie silence as the others in the room realize that something out of the ordinary is happening. Some of the students exchange nervous glances, while Master Caro narrows his eyes, curious about the sources of the anomaly. As Lyra continues the ritual, she feels a strong bond forming between her and Elric's spirit. The connection deepens, and Lyra senses Elric's longing for the life he left behind and his love for music. Despite her nervousness and confusion, Lyra is strangely comforted by this intimate link to the man she's about to resurrect. When the ritual is completed and Elric's undead form rises from the altar, Lyra can't help but feel a profound connection to him, unlike anything she has experienced before. She wonders if the beautiful song she heard is an indication of her unique abilities or if it was merely a figment of her imagination. This chapter not only foreshadows Lyra's rare gift for communicating with the souls of the enslaved dead, but also adds depth to the world of Evanreach by highlighting the ritualistic nature of necromancy and the unease surrounding such practices. All right, this is pretty good. It's not perfect. For instance, I don't imagine that this is a time when she would be surrounded by students watching what she's doing. I suppose I could change my mind on that, but I imagine this was just a private lesson between her and her necromancer teacher, Master Carol Blackthorn. And so that's something I will probably change here. Another thing that I noticed, it's very vague on the details of the actual necromancy, like the actual ritual that happens. That's something that I fleshed out a lot more in my world building doc. So I will go ahead and manually add in some more details about that, because if you leave it vague, when you get to the next step, which is the writing, it will remain vague for that chapter. So you want to make sure you have a lot of details, that you're telling it specifically what happens. Otherwise, it's just going to gloss over things. And so looking at this, I'm going to change a few things about it. But then we can move on to chapter 3, chapter 4, and so on. And that's how you outline the full novel. And so it does take a little bit of time, but definitely a lot less time than it would take to outline something like this on our own. And so having this framework definitely does help a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and continue outlining the rest of this novel. I'm going to do that on my own time, though, because you don't need to be here for the entire thing. So thank you. In the next video, we are going to be writing chapter 1, and we're going to write it with 2 different programs to see which one does better, which one I like better, and I'll see you then in the next video.